All right. Firstly, thank you everybody for coming to our webinar on how to manage business energy costs and how to identify and manage and drive down those costs. I'm Bruce McFarlane. I'm interim CEO and director here at Energy Action. I've had about, I think, over 20 years experience in energy markets across the gambit of wholesale, retail, and all the bits in between. In terms of housekeeping, I've got the camera on at the moment. I'll turn that off shortly so that you're not distracted by my wiggling around, so to speak. I've got a couple of things up on the screen. One's a PowerPoint, which should be presented to you at the moment. I'm sure our marketing managers, Sarah, will come and knock on the door and tell me that I'm not doing it right if I'm not doing it right. I've also got a script, so if I get a bit confused with moving the mouse around and things, bear with me as I do that. One last thing of housekeeping: if you've got questions, please do ask them, but just type them into the chat as we go through. Probably won't, do that awkward silence at the end saying any questions, and then just wait for nobody to ask any. Ask them as you go along, and then we'll and then I'll just do a wrap through them when we get to them at the end. So that's the approach I was going to take. Sit back and enjoy what we've got to say. I'll turn my camera off now so we can focus on the content. In terms of what we're here to talk about today, it's why does energy matter to businesses? Put some context on that about market and net zero. Why should we think about energy cost management as a driver within your business, and to manage that, to think that through across the different domains for a business, and then how to manage the business energy risks. Some commentary around that for each of the functional areas, how to manage risks across those areas. First thing that we wanted to talk about was, why does it matter to businesses now? Why does energy matter to businesses now? They're no longer a small expense. In recent years, energy costs have skyrocketed, and sustainability is increasingly becoming a top priority for businesses here in Australia. With government, there's government legislation set to extend into climate reporting requirements to more businesses than the youngest ones that we've got at the moment. So the functions across, it's increasingly becoming important across the functions of procurement, finance and sustainability. The fact is that last year we saw the consequence of weak legislation, bad policy, weak investment incentives, and lacklustre regulation, resulting in an Australia East Coast energy crisis, exacerbated by a lack of gas reservation for domestic customers and the impact of solar and wind power on our ageing thermal generation. Late last year, we saw the government introduce legislation capping domestic gas and coal prices, and that had an impact on ASX electricity futures prices, and that's of course on the East Coast. But what we're seeing at the moment is that prices are not falling any further than what they did after that legislation. We're also seeing that the impact of those gas price caps was that fixed price gas contracts are not being offered to business customers. So it's no longer just, in our view, energy is no longer something that can be set and forget. It needs active management and active consideration about how it can be, how to manage it. In terms of the other thing that's going on with energy is that carbon reporting is no longer for just big companies. So historically, carbon reporting has been a big business issue, in Australia, with the mandatory INGAS reporting applying to, by my count, about 15,000 entities. So we're starting to see the impact of international legislation locally, with a government responding to perhaps voter will, moving some of the carbon legislation that we're seeing internationally into our local environment. We also see Australian subsidiaries of international businesses, often European ones, having a corporate driver to put in place local net zero strategies and emissions reporting. So I don't know if I've got another slide on this. Yeah, no, I have. The climate legislation that we're seeing changing, on my last slide just highlighted some of those international trends. There's stuff in New Zealand that happened in the last couple of years, and there's legislation in the UK that's happened around climate reporting. We're seeing both. Those are two good examples. I've got a view that Australia follows UK energy and emissions legislation, and so we're starting to see that here in Australia. So we saw Treasury run the start of a legislative process to align ultimately to align our reporting on emissions to international standards. There was a request for a submission on a paper there earlier this year. So our view is that it's important to put in place the infrastructure, so to speak, to manage, to be able to respond to that ultimately. That legislation, for instance, the Treasury was running, will have a life cycle of its own, say 18 months, 24 months, but it's coming, and it'll extend beyond the current NGA's reporting requirements, in my view. And energy is one of the complex categories to try and manage, I mean in a data sense, for those reporting requirements. And putting that infrastructure in place early allows to enable reporting on it, allows companies to be able to then easily and simply respond to potential legislation that's coming through. The things that we've got here in the following slides around why you should be thinking about energy management. We've got in place, Energy Action is investing heavily in technology to manage energy data, and to then we layer our services on top of that energy data management. One of the things that we split that across a number of categories, which is broadly aligned to in my view, the functions of energy management, and one of those is energy procurement. The things to think about, I think, from a procurement space are probably threefold: their data, their contract management, and then their procurement process. Within our application and the roadmap that we've got in place, we're giving customers the ability to see futures, spot, and when I say spot pricing, it's electricity and gas, and it's with goodness gracious, it's with some averaging put in place so that you can see the broader trends rather than the immediate effect of an outage that happened on Friday night, for instance. It's environmentals, and Energy Action has got has had the foresight to track business contract prices over an extended period of time. I think it goes back as far as 2012 or so, our time series, but we're tracking and presenting to customers business contract prices that we get out of our auction platform, and giving customers the ability to see what's happening in the contracting market. So it's just another tool and price series so that customers can understand, people who are buying energy can understand what the trends might be associated with energy. The next thing I've got here is around automation. Part of the way to manage energy management, energy invoicing, is to receipt and convert invoices into data that can be then integrated into an accounts payable platform, and downstream applications for, say, sustainability reporting or emissions reporting in an effective way. So our view is, and we've built the processes around it, is that the financial functions within business should be automating those processes, and many will have already. I've been doing this for around 10 years, automation of the energy sector bills, but But energy is often a difficult category to automate. There's a lot of complexity associated on the page 2 of most bills. And so having processes in place to do that is a useful way of managing the data flows that come into businesses. The other parts of it are, in terms of finance automation, is that in my mind, there's three parts of energy invoicing automation. Those are, routine spend files, so it's allowing accounts payable people to have more effective automation. There's an accruals process, so that cash management is able to be anticipated, immediate. There's no surprise bills. And lastly, budgets. Often they are a set and forget exercise, but budgeting can be incredibly powerful. And having an automated bill feed of energy invoices allows you to track your budgets much more clearly and in real time. So that's the accounts finance, the accounts payable and finance automation stuff that we think is important to customers to manage the category. In terms of net zero and the sustainability manager, we're seeing an increasing acceptance and encouragement from boards and senior management that the sustainability or emissions reporting function get integrated into the broader business context rather than just being a standalone function where might do small projects. It will be a compliance function. It's becoming much more pervasive in its needs and ability to effectively support businesses. We're building out a net zero capability that builds on that energy data management service that I talked about, i.e., the ability to receipt different data sources associated with energy, notably bill data and meter data, but also site data, and then be able to put in place net zero to record, I guess is the right way to describe it, sustainability plans that can extend into the energy category, and then track against those the performance of the business in real time. So as new meter data or bill data comes in, a sustainability manager can see the consequences of what's going on in an operation out in their business operations. Equally, there should be the ability to see what the return on investment from either solar things, which often have a cost driver rather than an emissions driver, but equally will have an emissions outcome, as well as other things that might have a direct cost and emissions drivers, such as the purchase of offsets and carbon certificates. So we've got a view that having in place that energy management, sustainability is now part of the energy management suite that a business should be looking to have, and then it needs to sit on top of high quality data processes to support it that happen in real time. The last slide that I've got here, I seem to rattle through them really, really quickly. It's my style, I guess, is that the business energy risks, because of the high cost associated with energy that we're seeing at the moment, and that potentially could last for an extended period of time on the assumption that we're not going to get additional government intervention in energy markets, is that there's a set of risks across procurement, finance, and sustainability. Within the procurement function, there's the need to be informed about what the forward contracting markets look like and what the general trends are. And if there is the opportunity, if a procurement manager forms the view that there is the ability to react to energy trends, energy price trends, then the data needs to be in place to package up a request for tender or an auction process, certainly a procurement process, let me call it that, a procurement process to take advantage of those trends. The second set of risks is across finance. There's a real need to manage energy data. Energy data and for a business, the highest risk, of course, is disconnections. Underneath, which is accounts payable function, and making sure that that things are paid in a timely way and in the correct way. That integration of energy data through to the account and accounts payable function into a broader ERP application means that type of risk is mitigated. The flip side of it is the cash risk and the cash payment risk associated with unexpected invoices and things like that. With good budgeting processes that are being updated in a reasonable time frame, well, in real time, in the case of the application that we've put in place, you start to manage the cash payment risk that businesses could face associated with energy contracting and energy payments. And lastly, the last risk that I've mapped out is around sustainability. We are seeing the impact of a progressive government here in Australia, the adoption of international legislative change or legislation that's happened internationally, and the exploration of aligning local standards, accounting standards, and emissions risk management standards to international standards. Energy is a complex category. It's usually made complex by a high number of sites or a high, the volatility associated with contracting and that type of thing. Then, in my view, the best way to mitigate it is to have, I call it an infrastructure in place that allows businesses to manage that data and anticipate what those ultimately legislative requirements could be, and to start delivering against them in an effective way, reporting on them in an effective way ahead of the legislation coming in place, so that it's not a surprise and it becomes a routine for a business, easy for a business. That's probably all I had to say. That's the end of my topic. I hope you enjoyed it. I haven't got any questions in the thing there. I've got one from is there a company that's specialising in net zero reporting for business? Energy Action has adopted, I won't answer that question directly. Energy Action has invested in achieving climate active certification, which is a government standard. We did that because we wanted to demonstrate to our business customers that it is largely our cohort of customers that it's not a hard thing to do. In terms of providing a reference for businesses that can help in net zero reporting, it's one of the things that Energy Action does do. We've got an application that helps to sustain that type of reporting requirement. The separate things around auditing of requirements and things like that are often specialist services, and Energy Action can certainly refer people to those sorts of things. I've got another question here about onboarding timeline and how to integrate customer business processes. Customer onboarding timeline. My experience is that customer onboarding should be quick, right? Let me dig into that. The key constraints with onboarding a customer, and when I say onboarding, I'm talking about into an energy management application, for instance, like Energy Action has built, is that you have to collect data, and that data is often sitting in either a retailer's environment, billing environment, or portal environment if you're lucky, or it's sitting in a third-party application that a customer might be using already. So that's your key constraint, getting access to the data. After you've got access to the data, the conversion of that data into a standardized format and the delivery of services is a short-term and very quick process. It's couple of day turnaround, so to speak, for a large customer with multiple sites, say 300 plus sites. It's not a hard process to convert data and to present it to clients to say, here's the services that you have. But the elapsed time to collect data can be problematic. So ways customers can mitigate that is have the keys to their retailer portals, energy retailer portals, have logins to those energy retailer portals. A business like ours is able to connect to those energy retail portals and collect the bills out of them very, very quickly. We built the products that allow us to do that. The metering is again often a manual handshake with the metering provider to collect and receive that data from the metering provider as well. And lastly, there's the internal processes within a business as to do they have energy contracts on hand and that type of thing, which they may not do, in which case you might have to ask the retailer for it, and then you're into the turnaround times for retailers, which can be for an effective retailer as quick as 3 to 3 days-ish, and if it's an ineffective retailer or an overworked retailer or under-resourced retailer might be fairer, that time period can extend out to a longer time period, as long as, say, 20 days to collect data. But once data is received, an energy management application should be able to convert that into data that a customer sees very, very quickly, almost real time. I can imagine that it's within hours, and then there's some data cleanup associated with it. Okay, hope that answers those two questions. So in terms of this webinar, I appreciate everybody's time. I won't keep drag things on just for the sake of it, but thank you for joining our webinar for around energy risks and how to manage costs around business energy. If you've got any further questions, please feel to reach out to us. I think we're pretty effective with publishing our details on the internet and that type of thing. My key takeaway here is that energy reporting is not just for big business anymore. It's something that businesses need to be prepared for. And the flip side of that is around business cost. You can manage costs very effectively when you have the data and can get access to that data and have have a good understanding of energy market trends and price trends associated with it. So with that, thank you very much. I'll sign off. Appreciate your time. It's good to be able to give this presentation to everybody. Goodbye.